Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 32 of season 2017. My name is Lee. I'm in Western Australia this week. We've got Vicus and we've got Zeev.
G'day.
Hey,
Both
how's it
in
going?
communist areas which have daylight savings, which makes my life difficult. So,
I'm almost certain. Yeah, I'm almost certain that daylight savings is a Bolshevist plot.
yeah. They
Almost.
All are. They always are.
Actually, they frequently are. Yeah.
So we're
If
going to
it's
talk
by
about...
gov-
Oh, sorry, go.
If it's a government control to take over time, that's my idea. Yeah. Okay, go on.
So we're going to talk about two different things, maybe three things if we get to it. We're going to talk about the ban, the theoretical ban. That's the government's still working on it, but they're talking about having a ban on all foreign donations related to politics, including charities, including unions, and then we're also going to try and talk about the Chris Gayle case, the defamation case that was just sort of resolved today in Chris Gayle's favour. Against Fairfax Media, that wonderful organisation. So let's first talk about, we also might talk about the ATO because the ATO not making enough money is a running thing for us. So first off, let's talk about
True.
foreign donations, because those damn foreigners, they're corrupting our democracy with all their foreignness. You know, George or China or whoever.
George Soros,
Yeah.
China, or Rupert Murdoch.
Or Vladimir Putin. Take your pick.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a running theme. It seems to be that the foreigners are here to take over our elections, which I find laughable to begin with. Okay, so foreigners don't get to vote in our election. So here's the thing: let's pretend they are paying politicians, right? And let's pretend they're paying politicians for special favors, and let's pretend they're paying for special favors that go against the national interest. Why do our politicians have that power? I mean, that's where my mind would go. Right, like to me, the problem there
More
isn't
problematic.
that. Yeah. Sorry, the problem there in my mind isn't that there are foreign people giving money to the politicians. It's that you can buy a politician.
Sure.
Yes, that's one important point. And the only reason you can buy a politician, by the way, is because a majority of people are willing to vote for that politician. And that can really only happen because the national electoral agenda is one that is shaped towards politicians handing out extraordinary, massive favours to the electorate and to special interest groups when the electorate isn't paying much attention and couldn't care less. So I guess you might say that in that sense it is the product of a welfare state mentality. One other point I would make is that the fact that people are foreigners does not mean that they are in every way opposed to us. And there's this kind of foreigner hysteria going on. I mean, the difference between a foreigner and a non-foreigner, it's like if a New Zealander, for example, or a Canadian were in itself giving us money to, I don't know, open a newspaper here, that's fine. But if it's to open a lobby group which lobbies on politics, that's not fine. Although a newspaper would do the same. Distinctions here are pretty arbitrary if you think about it. It's motivated by a genuine concern, perhaps, but when you break it down, it just doesn't make sense. It's not to say that people don't genuinely feel this way. I just don't see how it makes sense to deal with it in the way they're proposing.
Sure, but it also... So the interesting thing is, right now, we actually have a mechanism right now that kind of forces people to sort of come out and say, you know, I don't take foreign donations, right? Like, so for example, the accusation of you take foreign donations means that a lot of parties, so particularly the Labour Party is good at this, they look at the source of their income, right? Sorry, the source of the income of the person donating it, and they have knocked back, and there was a chaser stunt where this was looked up, they've knocked back people who can't prove that they're Australian citizens. And that's something their party believes in, right? So they put in the bureaucracy to handle that. When the government handles it, well, now there's an implied assumption that all donations are, from Australia itself. And now it becomes a public expense to now police it and prove that it's not, right? As opposed to a personal bureaucracy from like a political party. I think we're much better at handling this without getting the government involved. I think the fact if a organization is taking a lot of foreign money, and the best example is George Soros and Avaz, right? So that is an organization that does involve itself in particularly the progressive side of politics here in Australia, and that is funded by George
What about
Soros.
the Koch brothers, Vickers? The Koch brothers and their terrible campaign to destroy Australia and or
Oh
America.
yeah. Through the Australian Taxpayers Association. Yeah. So
Yes.
that's yeah.
Our
So
friend
that's
Tim Andrews.
yeah. Our friend Tim Andrews.
He's a
That's
dude,
another.
yeah.
That's another example I forgot about. But like, if you take a look at it, these organizations are public about their associations with these people, right? And for some people, that's a point where they go, oh, you can't trust them because they're funded by the Koch brothers. But simultaneously, like, I would actually regard anything funded by the Koch brothers as a seal of approval for this is a legit this is a good organization, by the way. Because if in case anyone's not aware, the Koch brothers are basically a very consistent funding source for civil liberties organizations.
Yeah, but libertarians.
Well, look, I mean, apart from that, I think the appropriate way to deal with all sources of funding is to note it, but not conclude that either way it really proves too much about any particular person who receives it. That holds of lobby groups and people generally. I think that's the mature and realistic thing to say. People are not these kind of slaves to money that the mass media likes to make them out to be. They hold genuine beliefs. They conduct research. They put time and effort into what they're saying, and we shouldn't discount the fact that for a lot of people, left or right, they really do believe it. And the fact that they're getting money from foreigners, locals, or, I don't know, the local church does not change that. Okay? Maybe for a few, 1 out of 10... I'm not saying there aren't people out there who are total shills and, you know, they give them money and they will spout whatever, but it's just, it doesn't really deal with what they're saying.
Yeah.
And this is part of the problem of the foreign donation hysteria. It doesn't actually deal with what these people, or the foreigners, the evil foreigners, it doesn't actually deal with the merits of whatever they're supporting. It's just like this presumptive assumption that whatever they have to say is wrong in itself.
It's an ad hominem.
It's an ad hominem, exactly. Yeah. And it's an inaccurate and unfair ad hominem. Whether it's Get Up on the left or Tim Andrews on the right.
Actually, I would say IPA. IPA is the equivalent.
IPA, the IPA, sure. Whether it's Tim Andrews on the left or the IPA on the right, I'd say it's very unfair.
Right. Tim Andrews is on the left. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Whatever. It's unfair to characterize these people as slaves to their donation sources because they're not. Anyway, I'm done.
Well, they might be. But
I was going to say two things. So, I mean, the first thing is that, this is in response to, like, Chinese organizations and businesses giving money to both sides of politics. That's the always hilarious thing about anything to do with,
That's actually not true. This is about Get Up. About Get Up.
I mean, it is about them as well, but I think it's, like quite often businesses give money to both sides of politics. So if you want to make the case that there's like some evil oligarchical conspiracy to like take over Australia, well, the thing is that a lot of big businesses give to both sides of politics. So like the notion that somehow China's trying to like take over via the Labour Party or via, like if you give to both, like there's still going to be, it's not like the liberals and Labour are going to like all of a sudden have a truce because China's given them both money. Like in the end, they're still going to be at each other's throats. So you're still going to have the same competitive political processes that push the parties to be against each other over every small stupid thing, even if, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think every argument against restriction, like this is just an easy way of restricting how people spend their money on politics. So politicians always want to protect themselves. So, when it's liberals, they want to get up, they want to get at the unions, they want to stop the unions and get it from influencing politics. And, for the Greens and Labor, they want to kick out the corporations. They don't like the corporations. They want to they want to kick their money out of the politics. So it's always partisan. It's always choosing their side they want to get rid of. And, but their side is fine. Like they want to keep their side. And ultimately they want to keep everybody out of politics. So when you look at campaign finance in America in particular, if it's incredibly difficult if you're an outsider candidate to raise money to, compete with the established parties, with the Democrats and the Republicans. And I imagine if these politicians in Australia could do the same here, they probably would. And foreigners are just always an easy target. It's always easy to say, oh, the foreigners, we need to be afraid of them. We need to kick them out of the process. And I think it's no different from any other argument about restricting money in politics. I think there should be no restrictions on how much money people raise and spend. If they want to disclose, they should. Like, I think it's good for them to disclose. I don't think they should be forced to. Let money speak. I mean, that's one of the great things about the Citizens United case in the US, which is it says money is speech. How you spend your money is the equivalent of how you, is a way which you can influence the political process. It's no different. And any argument against campaign finance, I think, is usually hypocritical because it's coming from the media, who are massive organizations that try to influence the political process, or from political parties who obviously have an vested interest in keeping out competitors. They don't want people to, come along and push them around or push them out. And so they want to try and make it difficult for everybody to raise money.
Yep.
So yeah, that's.
But yeah, so I think all three of us are on board with saying it should be like open and transparent, and that's really what we're asking for. And I think, but not in the way that a government would get involved to get there. I think organizations would elect to. Yeah, I reckon organizations would voluntarily, if that was actually important to people, and I don't think it is. I actually don't think it's actually that important. I think if it was really important to people, parties would be doing it voluntarily, right? Parties would have like these websites going like, here's everyone that donated to us, right? Here's the name of every person that donated to us. And the result of that would be like people looking at that and going, oh, that's awesome, right? I can see that. Oh, look, I can see that this corporation this corporation donated this much money to them. Yeah. So and so from the perspective of, is transparency important in the political process? I think we're all hypocritical. I don't think it is. I think most of us don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right. And I think most of us.
This is. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, and I think the fear or anything comes from the idea that a politician can be bought. Right, but we're not willing to sort of be vigilant about things like that.
I mean, there is the. I mean, I think there is a point to which you get to the question of corruption, like actual bribery. Like, if
the bribery doesn't come up in the form of
comes along and say, we're going to give you $1 million to like vote on this issue.
Yeah, but it doesn't come in the form of campaign financing. That doesn't come in the campaign. That's not done in campaign financing. That's usually done under something like you arrange this for us, and we'll give you this many shares in your holding corporation. Yeah, right. That's usually how those things are done.
Can I just make another point about campaign financing generally for a moment? What Lee mentioned earlier, that money is speech. I think I just want to develop that for a moment, because it's a very good point, and I think it should be developed. Look, I mean, if I want to be a lawyer, and I am for the sake of argument, I need to pay overheads for my firm to be a lawyer. Because you want to be a computer programmer, you need a computer. All of these things cost money. Yeah. Okay. Any political campaigner out there, in order to express their views in the public arena, needs money. So when people talk about controlling money and taking money away from people, what they're really doing is saying people shouldn't be allowed to exercise their right to spend their money how they want to, among other things, in order to ensure that they make their views known. So apparently it's okay for a guy to get out on the street and say hello to people. I'd like to express my views, but heaven forbid if that same person should buy $1 million worth of pamphlets and hand those pamphlets out, or $1 million worth of ads. Or if it's his own money, that's fine, but if he gets that by way of foreign donations, terrible. Yeah. It doesn't really make sense if you break it down that way. Anyway,
I mean,
I'm sorry to have.
It's a great point, because I mean, there's a reason why we have freedom of the press and freedom of speech is synonymous. Because if you are free to speak, but you're not free to publish, if you're not free to, use means by which you promote your ideas beyond just literally standing up, like going up to individuals and saying, here, you should think this thing. Well, then what's the point of free speech if you can't deploy means to sort of broadcast your voice? So yeah, like that's...
Did you say deploy memes?
Well, deploy memes.
Well, but we're not aircraft bombers,
memes.
clearly, because this is... Right. Well, look, and this is the thing. I mean, foreign media influence the Australian narrative all the time.
Yeah.
Foreign media are owned by foreign companies. We can't control the amount of influence foreign culture has on us. It's profound.
Yeah.
And the idea that, this foreign donations, this will somehow profoundly influence, this ban will somehow profoundly influence the way in which foreigners affect us and our society. Well, it won't. I think it'll be a drop in the bucket. Our entire discourse is shaped by how the Americans, and to a lesser extent the Brits, think about things, and that won't change.
Well, especially
anyway.
In international social media. Like when people are sharing
Yeah.
Guardian articles or Fox News or whatever. It's not like...
Yeah.
Actually, Guardian's a good example because they're technically a British organisation, aren't they?
Yeah, British
Yeah.
Canadians, actually.
Yeah,
They're evil foreigners shaping our political discourse.
Oh my
How dare
goodness.
they? I mean,
The
honestly.
foreigners?
Yeah.
How dare they?
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The great thing I like about The Guardian is if they were ever in competition with the ABC, they would win so hard. I mean, The Guardian is effectively the answer to, does progressive media need public funding?
Yeah.
And the answer is emphatically no.
No. Well...
It's true, I guess. I mean, The Guardian is at least as far as opinion and commentary is concerned. I mean, I view The Guardian more than I do the ABC. The Guardian is one of my main news sources, frankly. Out of 3 or 4 that I read. The ABC doesn't write.
I mean...
maybe it's number 5 or 6 or 7.
To be fair,
Yeah.
the
It's actually-
ABC, I think... I mean, so my parents... Like, I've had a number of discussions with my dad. Like, I'm living with my parents while I study at uni, and my dad's a big fan of ABC, and my parents watch the ABC all the time, and they wouldn't read The Guardian. Like, they wouldn't be online to read articles. Like, we're all...
Have you explained?
We're
the
part of
TV
the
on,
social
like-
media generation.
Have you explained to your parents that they're the reason why progressive media fails?
I've had a number of arguments about this, but I mean, that's something I have raised. I've said, look, it does kill the like people can't compete against the ABC. It makes so I've made all those arguments, but in the end, yet to be persuaded. But nevertheless, just to
Why
say
not
that,
just open up the Guardian page on their computer and leave it at that?
I mean, I think the argument against
Like their
public
homepage.
funding of the ABC, like in time as those people all drop off, it's harsh to say this, but like I think once that generation shuffles off this mortal coil, I think it will be easy to make the case that we don't need a big billion-dollar corporation funded by taxpayers because we've got the internet. So anyway, we should move on. We're going to talk about Chris Gayle, who is a West Indies cricketer who has played a fair bit of cricket in Australia as part of the Big Bash League, the domestic 2020 league. And a few years ago, there was an accusation made that he revealed his men's parts to a
Genitals.
masseuse.
You can say genitals.
I said men's parts because I wanted to say it, because don't tell me what to do, all right? Am I being detained? So he was accused of this reveal, showing off his genitals, and
That's right, Lee went there.
Yeah, I went there.
Yeah.
He's Vickers. He always takes it down to the gutter, I tell you.
I know.
So accused of this thing. It was published in Fairfax. There was a storm of controversy. He sued Fairfax, and the court was decided in his favour today. I don't think there was. I don't think they mentioned the details of this or what the penalties will be, but nevertheless, they've.
Well, I don't think they've figured out what the penalties are yet.
Yeah,
maybe
I haven't yet.
Go.
So I remember when this came out, and I remember the articles being shared. So at the time, Chris Gayle had there was that rather embarrassing thing where he tried to smooth talk some woman
during
national
the
television.
It was. See, this is the only reason I know it is because the guy is one awkward fucking dude.
Yeah.
Right, and he's trying to hit on this chick, and very publicly she just goes she shoots him down.
Yeah.
And for some reason that was an example of sexual harassment. And then then this article came out, and I went like, okay, this seems like a pile-on, right? This seems like someone who's an editor has gone, what more can we find on Chris Gayle? And without doing very much fact-checking, they just took anyone off the street who was willing to try and make a quick buck off it and published it as a story, right? There was very little fact-checking, and that was one of the things that came out in this case. Like, yes, she was a masseuse that had worked for that team. There was no evidence of him ever exposing his genitals to her. In fact, most of his teammates basically said that's not what happened at all. There was a lot of evidence to the contrary, and there was just the word of this one woman who said it happened. And the court found there was very little evidence to suggest any further investigation had occurred by the newspaper, and they just published the story because, and this was the key thing in the ruling, the journalists were out to try and destroy Chris Gayle. So there was a clear act of maliciousness on the part of journalists to try and destroy this guy's career.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess I'm a little skeptical of that finding, to be honest. Like, what is it based on? Did they exchange text messages that they hate Chris Gayle or something? I mean, what's the basis for it?
I have no idea, but I'm sure once the publication is out on Osler, we can all have a nice read of it with all of the evidence in place. But that was a court reporter's statement that they'd found. Sorry, the court made a special mention that the journalists were found to be particularly malicious in this case. Right?
Well, look, I mean, I think that's a very
it's not the first time the court has made this determination, because it happened with Rebel Wilson's case as well, where pretty malicious lies were told about her to basically sell Women's Day magazine, right? So it's not unusual for journalists to make this to sort of create salacious statements to sell articles or sell newspapers. It happens, and that's what the purpose of defamation law as a tort exists for.
Sure, but I mean, I guess I'm skeptical of that for a couple of reasons. First of all, when you're dealing with cases like these, I'm not sure that we can really be so confident that they were maliciously out there to get him.
Again,
maybe they had some, because we can't really look into their minds.
Look, it's the comment of a judge, right? Like, I don't know exactly. I don't know how they've come to the determination. The judge has
clearly stepped into their minds and determined exactly what they thought at the time. This is me being a little sarcastic. But the point is that that when you're dealing with cases of defamation, the first question I think I'm a skeptic of defamation as an action, by the way. The first question I would ask is, why couldn't we just have this resolved in a way that does not involve the courts, as they are today, at least?
Sure, because millions of dollars of damage have been done to Chris Gayle, right? Fairfax is a multi-million-dollar organization that made millions of dollars off these stories, right? Technically, and this goes back to tort law, because that's where defamation comes from, right? Defamation started as a tort, right? So it seems
it is a tort.
It is a tort. So this is the court. I would argue in this situation, the court is the perfect place to have this debate, right? The guy can prove.
Perhaps.
I don't think so.
The guy can prove in this situation that there was a falsehood that was spread about him for profit on the part of Fairfax.
You've set out the ideal case for defamation, because what can I say? Look, what I would point out is that even if we're dealing with an ideal case, there are drawbacks. Okay, the first drawback is freedom of expression. Okay, there is a cost here in terms of, in general.
How is your freedom of expression?
Courts are that courts are inquiring about what people are saying and making judgments solely on the basis of what they are saying and whether that statement is true or not. That engaging in something that could amount to unwarranted, how would you say, oppressive action. If not in Mr. Gayle's case, then perhaps in other cases like it, for example, political cases. Politicians are the classic example of people who take out defamation suits because they're offended by some nasty headline. I mean, the Age put out a headline, "Treasurer for sale, Joe Hockey sued." I mean, public choice theory dictates that politicians are, in some sense or another, narrower, perhaps, than the headline suggests, for sale. In fact, cynical jokes are always made about how politicians are for sale, right? And yet Joe Hockey sued and won on the basis of this headline in defamation. So there is a danger that defamation suits can and do enter into political debates and can and do undermine free expression in those debates. I
don't think
the
that's
other
true.
point I would make, well, they have in Joe Hockey's case.
Well, no,
So
not
Donald
entirely.
Trump,
If you
I'll
read,
also add in that Donald Trump has bragged about how he uses libel to silence his critics. This is before he was even in politics. This is before he was president. He made comments about how essentially the process is the punishment. Like he bragged about dragging journalists into court just to essentially to punish them for talking about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, others have thought along those lines. Like I'm sure it's not a unique thought to him.
Yeah, so that's effectively what's that's a side effect of when politicians have gotten involved and turned defamation from a tort. So it is actually, torts have existed. Sorry, defamation has existed as a tort long before it existed anything remotely in statutory law, right? Now
that's true, but
yeah, but
right.
so let's say if you wind back, right, to how it should be. Right, because the thing is, like, once you got into statutory law, most of what the statutory defamation law does is reduce the burden. So the burden under torts is actually quite high. It's not utilized very often. And yes, like you said, it's placed a burden through the process. But having said that, so if it was proper tort law, you wouldn't arrive at the situation where a politician could just get offended and then basically say, I'm going to put you through the process of defending your statement, right?
But this is not about the onus, because this is on the merits. Joe Hockey won the case because
true.
he was found to have been defamed.
Yes.
Okay. So this is about a man who said that I'm not for sale as treasurer. But in my opinion, at least, I mean, that's a fair comment about every politician. Politicians buy and sell votes.
But that's not
in that sense, they're all.
That's not what but that's not what the article actually alleged. That was just the headline, right? The article went on to further allege certain transaction had taken place, which were proven not to be the case, right? There were active claims made other than the politician was for sale. So it's not as simple as you're saying, right? There are active claims that were proven to be false.
I've got something to add to what Steve has already said about freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to make your second point? Because we're starting to run out of time. So you had another point you wanted to make about this?
To whom? To whom is that?
You said you were going to make yet another point to make about this Chris Gayle case.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess the second point is there are actually alternative means of pursuing this. One, for example, is a complaint to the Press Council. Two is the fact that he can issue press releases. Now, I'm not saying that these are all ideal outcomes. Defamation is not an ideal outcome either. But at least with those two outcomes, the process is voluntary, or at least not...
Doesn't go through
well, at least not coercive in the sense of defamation law. Now, if the parties want to agree to a defamation-like proceeding, where the newspaper pays out damages if it's found to have been engaged in falsehoods, okay, that's fine by me. But what I do object to is the idea that judges should sit around and tell us whether we've lied. I mean, it really strikes me as something that is not the province of courts to say sticks and what's the saying? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. People don't have a right to other people's reputations.
That's okay. I was going to make.
So I want to retort.
That's all I'm saying.
No, I'm going to make a comment, and then you're going to talk because we're going to run out of time if we go for too much longer.
Okay, I don't have property in. If I don't have property in other people's thoughts. All I'm saying is people don't have property in other people's opinions of me. People can make whatever judgments of me they like. I don't have property in those judgments. Even if someone speaks badly of me, I still don't have property in them.
Okay,
you can have
both of you have the same point.
No, I've got one more point to think. I want to say, and then you can have the final word. You can have the final statement, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Vickers.
Okay.
That's you. Okay, so you get the final word, Vickers. So I was going to say that people don't have property in other people's reputation. I was going to make that comment. Also, generally the justification for defamation is that it's to protect the little guy from the big guy. You know, it's there to stop, poor shopkeeper being, being accosted, like having articles written about him in newspapers or whatever. And that's not what we see in this case. And I think this sort of follows up from what Zeev said, which is Chris Gayle's earned millions of dollars playing cricket. Like he's an international cricket player. Like I don't know what his contract was with in Big Bash, but I think it's a lot of money. Like there's a lot of money in that sort of stuff. So this is a guy who can fend for himself. Like he's not, he's got a reputation entirely apart from whether he's revealed himself to a masseuse. This is not, and I don't think you're necessarily going to see a whole lot of like the little guy. We see an awful lot of rich people who have the ability to pay for the lawyer's fees if they lose, going in defamation cases. We don't see a whole lot of like guys like me, Coles worker, going along and suing for defamation. So that's my take on it. Along with the reputation thing, yeah, you don't have property in other people's life or thoughts about you. Vickers have the final word, and then we'll wrap up.
Right. So firstly, both of them are absolutely wrong. Because firstly, judges absolutely make decisions on whether someone's lying or not. In fact, that's their fucking job. Every fucking murder case is literally about whether the defendant was lying or not. Secondly,
it's about murder. It's not about lying. It's about whether a murder happened. Go on.
Yeah, but they still make a determination whether the person's excuse was a lie or not.
Yeah,
right.
I know.
Okay.
Go
yeah,
on.
Okay.
But in itself,
Second thing. The tort of defamation does not assert property rights over opinions. It refers to lost income or provable financial damage. It never talks about the opinions of other people. It talks about actual provable damages. That's the same as anything in torts. Finally, Fairfax's valuation is currently $2.7 billion. Chris Gayle's income last year was $15 million. That is about as little as a little guy can get against a fucking Goliath. And if you want to make the argument that $15 million is a large amount, seriously, that is the most communist argument I've ever heard. It's like all of a sudden there is a number. There is a number after which you no longer have the right, it's like there is a number where you no longer have the right to justice according to Lee. That's effectively.
I'm promising you, there's gonna be round 2 on this because I'm sure both Zeev and I have a comment. We'd like to reply, but you have the final word, so we're gonna leave it at that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been
come on! Can I?
No. He
agreed to the final word.
The final word. So moderator's privilege. We'll have round 2.
I didn't sign that contract.
Well,
that's what happens when you talk so slowly.
In charge of the recording.
That's what happens when you talk so slowly.
Yeah. I'm the benevolent but still dictator of this show. So we'll leave it there. We're definitely gonna have to talk about this again because there's much more to be said. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Make sure, of course, you like, share, subscribe, iTunes, Facebook, YouTube. Yeah, that's it. Okay, thanks.